My name is Maya Whitmore. I'm 34, a high-stakes cardiology resident at Mercy General, and a single mother to my 3-year-old twins, Sophie and Noah. 8 weeks ago, I found myself strapped to a freezing cold gurney in the trauma bay, the sterile scent of antiseptic stinging my nostrils while I bled out internally from a massive T-bone collision. My hands were clutched in a death grip around my iPhone as I dialed my parents' number with trembling, blood-stained fingers. I needed someone, anyone, to dash over to my place and watch Sophie and Noah for just a few hours while the surgical team prepped to crack my chest and save my life. What I received in return was a digital slap in the face, a group text notification that pinged with a sickening lightness. The message in our family group chat from my mother read, "You've always been a nuisance and a burden, Maya. We have front row floor seats for the Taylor Swift Eras Tour with Sloan tonight. This was a non-refundable investment. Figure it out yourself." So, I did. Lying there under the harsh fluorescent lights of the ER, with a heart monitor beeping out my fading rhythm, I called a high-end emergency nanny service, paid triple the holiday rate on my Amex, and made a decision that would incinerate my past and change everything. I cut them off completely. No more safety net for people who let me drown. The monthly mortgage payments on their suburban colonial, the gold-tier health insurance premiums, the unexpected car repairs for my father's SUV, everything I'd been quietly paying for the past 8 years was effectively gone. I pulled the plug on their lifestyle with a single tap on my banking app. 2 weeks later, there was a heavy, authoritative knock on my door. Before I tell you who was standing there on my porch and what happened next, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this story of resilience and cold, hard reality. Drop a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. I love connecting with my community. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Growing up in the Whitmore household, I learned early that love came with a rigid, unforgiving ranking system. My older sister Sloane was the star, always had been. She was 3 years older, effortlessly beautiful in that California cool way, and had this magnetic quality that made our parents beam with unearned pride whenever she walked into a room. When she announced she wanted to pursue luxury fashion design at Parsons, Mom cried theatrical happy tears. Dad called her our little creative genius. When I said I wanted to become a cardiothoracic surgeon, Dad barely looked up from the Wall Street Journal and nodded. That's practical," he grunted. That was it. Practical. A fallback plan for a girl who didn't have star power. I told myself it didn't matter. I buried myself in 1,000-page textbooks, aced every MCAT exam, and clawed my way into one of the top medical schools in the country. 4 years of undergrad at Hopkins, 4 years of medical school, 3 years of brutal residency specializing in cardiology. The day I graduated from medical school should have been one of the proudest moments of my life, the culmination of a decade of blood, sweat, and caffeine-induced shakes. My parents arrived 2 hours late to the ceremony. "Sorry, sweetheart," Mom said, adjusting her designer scarf and not quite meeting my eyes. Sloane had an emergency meeting with a potential angel investor. We had to drop her off first. Her career is in a sensitive growth phase. No flowers, no celebration dinner at a steakhouse, just a quick, blurry photo in the parking lot before they rushed off because Sloane needed emotional support after her meeting didn't go exactly as planned. Compare that to Sloane's first pop-up fashion show 3 years earlier. The whole family flew to New York City, stayed in a five-star hotel in Soho, and sat in front row seats. Dad posted 17 photos on Facebook with captions like, "So proud of our talented girl conquering the runway." I got a parking lot photo and a lukewarm, "Congrats, honey. Now don't be late for your shift." I told myself it made sense. Fashion is fickle and competitive. Sloane needed more of a psychological support system. Medicine is stable. I could handle things on my own. But what I didn't know then was that my parents' favoritism wasn't just emotional. It was systematically financial. And I was the one subsidizing their comfort while I worked 80-hour weeks. It started 8 years ago, right after I finished medical school and started my first internship. Dad called me one evening, his voice strained with a performative embarrassment. "Maya, we're in a bit of a bind. The mortgage payment is due and liquidity is tight this month. Could you help us out? Just this once?" I transferred $2,400 that night without hesitation. They were my parents, the people who raised me. Of course I would help. But just this once became the baseline for every month. The mortgage, then their premium health insurance premiums, $800 monthly when my dad's company dropped their coverage. Then the endless string of emergencies, the car repairs, the roof leak after a summer storm, the new high-efficiency furnace. I never said no, not once. I was the family's private ATM, and I didn't even realize it. When I got pregnant with the twins and their father walked out during my second trimester to find himself in Montana, I called my parents from the hospital after a scary bleeding episode. I was terrified, alone, desperate for a hand to hold. "Oh, honey, we wish we could come," Mom said, over the sound of a cocktail shaker. "But Sloane is so stressed after her show in Paris. She really needs us right now to help her decompress." They didn't come. Not for the birth via emergency C-section, not for the first month when I was barely sleeping, nursing 2 newborns while studying for my board exams. I was a ghost in their lives, unless a bill was due. But the automatic transfers kept going out like clockwork. $2,400 for the mortgage, $800 for insurance, whatever else they needed to maintain the facade of their upper-middle-class life. I kept a spreadsheet hidden in a password-protected folder on my MacBook. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me needed to see the cost of their love in black and white. The numbers were staggering. 8 years, $320,000, give or take. I never asked for gratitude. I never expected a parade down Main Street. But I also never expected to be called a burden by the people I'd been financially carrying for almost a decade. That reckoning was coming at 60 miles per hour. I just didn't know it yet. The accident happened on a rain-slicked Tuesday evening. I was driving home after a grueling 16-hour shift. My eyes were heavy, burning from the hospital's dry air, but I was alert enough. The light turned green. I pulled into the intersection of 5th and Main. I never saw the Ford F-150. It ran the red light, doing well over 50. The impact hit my driver's side door with the force of a bomb. Glass exploded into shimmering diamonds. Metal screamed as it folded like paper. The world spun in a violent blur of gray and chrome, then went black. I woke up in an ambulance, the siren wailing a mournful note above me. Pain was searing through my abdomen like a hot iron. A familiar face hovered above me. Maya, can you hear me?" It was Dr. Smith, the head of emergency medicine at my hospital. We'd worked together for 2 years. Julian? My voice came out as a raspy whisper. What's the damage? You were in an accident. We're taking you in now. Possible internal bleeding in the splenic artery. You're going to need surgery immediately. Surgery? The word hit me like a second collision. My kids. I grabbed his arm, my knuckles white. Sophie and Noah, they're with the babysitter. She leaves at 8 on the dot. Julian checked his Omega watch. It's 7:15. 45 minutes. I had 45 minutes to find someone to watch my children while doctors cut me open to stop the hemorrhaging. I fumbled for my phone with shaking hands. Blood smeared across the cracked screen as I pulled up my parents' number. It rang 4 times. Maya? Dad's voice was impatient, the sound of a pre-concert crowd humming in the background. We're about to leave. What is it? Dad, I need help. The words tumbled out between gasps of pain. I was in an accident. I'm being taken to the hospital. Surgery. Please, I need you and Mom to watch the twins just for a few hours. Please. Silence on the line. Then the sound of muffled voices. My mother's tone came through, sharp and annoyed. Sloane's high-pitched laugh echoed in the background. The line went quiet. Then my phone buzzed with a text notification that would shatter my heart more than the crash ever could. Family group chat. The message was from my mother. Maya, you've always been a nuisance and a burden. We have Taylor Swift tickets with Sloane tonight. We've been planning this for months, and these seats cost 4 figures. Figure it out yourself. I read it twice, 3 times. The words didn't change. The blue text bubble felt like a toxic spill. A second message appeared from Dad. You're a doctor. You're used to hospitals. Don't make this into a bigger deal than it needs to be. We'll talk tomorrow. Then Sloane. Not words, just a laughing emoji. A digital snicker while I was fighting for my next breath. That was it. That was all I was worth to them. A laughing emoji while I lay bleeding in an ambulance. Julian was watching me. I didn't realize he could see my screen until he spoke. Maya. His voice was careful, professional, but laced with a dark fury. What did they say? I couldn't answer. Something had cracked open inside me, and it wasn't just the internal bleeding. The facade of our loving family had finally disintegrated. I need a phone, I whispered. A phone with internet. Mine's shattered. He handed me his work phone without question. I Googled emergency nanny services, found one with 24-hour availability in the Heights, called, explained the situation in clipped professional sentences. Yes, I would pay triple the rate. Yes, I would provide the babysitter's contact for handoff instructions. Yes, I authorized an immediate $1,000 deposit. It was done in 4 minutes. Julian was still watching me when I handed back his phone. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Can you screenshot those messages? I asked as my consciousness started to slip. Before this life ends. He nodded slowly. Yeah, I can do that. Consider it done. I closed my eyes as the ambulance pulled into the hospital bay. The pain was overwhelming now, but it wasn't coming from my abdomen anymore. It was the cold, hollow realization that I was truly alone. From that hospital bed, with an IV in my arm and fear in my heart, I made the easiest decision of my life. I was done being their nuisance. I was going to be their ghost. The surgery took 4 grueling hours. They had to perform an emergency exploratory laparotomy to find the source of the bleeding, a grade 4 ruptured spleen, and a lacerated liver. Another few minutes on that rain-slicked pavement, and I might not have made it to see my children grow up. I spent 5 days in a sterile, high-observation room at Mercy General, 5 days of chilled saline drips, a Dilaudid-induced haze, and cardiac monitors chirping a lonely rhythm in the middle of the night. Not one call from my parents on my private line. Not one text asking if the surgery was a success. Not even a get-well-soon bouquet of cheap supermarket carnations. The emergency nanny service I'd hired from my gurney was expensive, but they were the only family I had in those 5 days. They coordinated perfectly with my regular sitter, kept Sophie and Noah safe, fed and distracted with Disney movies, and sent me daily photo updates of their messy, smiling faces. It was a bitter pill to swallow. Total strangers were managing my life's crisis with more grace and empathy than the people who shared my DNA. On day 3, with the surgical incision across my abdomen burning like a hot wire, I asked the nurse for my laptop. "Are you sure you're up for it, Dr. Whitmore?" she asked, adjusting my vitals monitor. "You should be resting. Your heart rate is still a bit tachycardic." "I need to take care of something that's been overdue for a decade," I replied, my voice raspy but steady. My hands were surprisingly steady as I logged into my banking app on the hospital's secure Wi-Fi. 8 years of automatic transfers stared back at me in a neat, soul-crushing row. Regular as clockwork, the lifeblood of my parents' suburban facade. $2,400 on the first of every month for a mortgage they couldn't afford. $800 on the 15th for health insurance premiums they never thanked me for. I canceled them all. One by one, I hit the Stop Series button, watching the confirmation prompts disappear into the digital void. Then I opened my phone settings, my thumb hovering only for a second before I blocked my father's number, my mother's, and Sloane's line. There was no dramatic moment, no cinematic tears, no second-guessing my own sanity. It felt like setting down a 100-pound weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it was there. I was no longer the silent benefactor of their arrogance. Dr. Julian Smith stopped by later that afternoon, his white coat crisp and smelling faintly of Starbucks espresso. He'd checked on me every single day, bringing actual gourmet coffee and the kind of quiet company that doesn't require explanation. "How are you feeling, Maya?" he asked, pulling up a chair and checking my chart. I looked up at him, the late afternoon sun filtering through the hospital blinds, and for the first time in years, I told the absolute truth. Better. Lighter. For the first time in 8 years, I actually feel like I can breathe. He didn't push for details. As an ER doctor, he'd seen enough family trauma to read between the lines. He just nodded like he understood the exact weight of the bridge I'd just burned. I knew the fallout was coming. The sirens would go off the moment their debit cards were declined at Whole Foods. My parents would notice the missing money. They would rage and cry theatrical tears and demand explanations for my unprovoked cruelty. But I didn't expect what came next. 2 weeks after my surgery, I was finally home, moving slowly with a hand braced against my side, still sore but alive. It was a crisp Saturday morning in our quiet cul-de-sac. I was making buttermilk pancakes for Sophie and Noah, their favorite weekend treat. The kitchen smelled like butter, maple syrup, and the promise of a fresh start. Noah was trying to stack his Lego blocks into a skyscraper. Sophie was helping by knocking them down with a roar. Then came the knock. 3 sharp, rhythmic raps on my front door that didn't sound like the frantic pounding of my mother or the soft tapping of a neighbor. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, my heart rate spiking despite the beta blockers. If it was my parents coming to stage an intervention, I wasn't ready. I didn't know if I'd ever be ready to look at the people who left me to die. I looked through the peephole, and my breath caught in my chest. Standing on my doorstep was a tall man in his 70s, wearing a tailored navy overcoat and a charcoal wool scarf. Silver hair, neatly combed back with military precision, and sharp blue eyes that I remembered from holidays a lifetime ago. A posture that still carried the unyielding authority of 40 years on the federal bench. It was Judge Harrison, my grandfather. I hadn't seen him in almost 3 years. My parents always had elaborate excuses for why we couldn't visit his estate in the Berkshires. Too busy, too far, too inconvenient for Sloane's schedule. I opened the door, and he pulled me into a hug so tight and genuine, it made my surgical incision ache. Maya. His voice was rough, layered with a gravitas that commanded the room. Let me look at you. He pulled back, his eyes scanning my face, then dropping to where my hand rested protectively over my abdomen under my oversized sweatshirt. I know everything, he said quietly, his gaze turning as cold as a winter gavel. Joe told me. Aunt Jo, my mother's younger sister, the only person in the family who'd ever openly questioned how my parents treated me like a high-yield savings account. Grandpa, I don't... He held up a hand, the same hand that had signed thousands of warrants and judgments. You don't need to explain anything, Maya. But I do need you to come somewhere with me. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, cream-colored, elegant, embossed with the seal of the Harrison estate. An invitation. My 71st birthday party next Saturday at the club. The whole family will be there. His eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw the fire of a judge who had seen one too many injustices. And I have some things that need to be said on the record. Judge Harrison sat at my kitchen table, watching Sophie and Noah with a soft, rare smile. They'd taken to him immediately, showing off their stuffed dinosaurs and demanding his attention as if they knew this man was the only real protection they had. He gave it freely. They look just like you did at that age, he said, his voice softening. Same stubborn chin and those bright, inquisitive eyes. I sat down, 2 cups of dark roast coffee, and took the seat across from him. Grandpa, how did you find out about the accident? About everything? Joe called me the night it happened. He wrapped his large, weathered hands around the mug. She'd heard through one of your cousins at the hospital. When she told me what your parents did, what Victoria said to you while you were being prepped for the OR, he stopped, his jaw tightening until I could hear the faint grind of teeth. I've watched this for years, Maya. The way Richard and Victoria treat you versus Sloane. I'm old, but I'm not blind to the stench of entitlement. I stared at my coffee, watching the steam swirl. I thought maybe I was imagining it, making it bigger than it was, that maybe I really was the nuisance. You weren't. His voice carried the weight of a man who'd spent decades separating truth from lies in a court of law. I was a federal judge for 40 years. I know how to read people. I know what favoritism looks like, and I know what financial exploitation looks like. He leaned forward, his presence filling my small kitchen. Tell me something. Do you still have records of the money you've sent them? The digital paper trail? I nodded slowly. Every transfer, 8 years of receipts. Good. He sat back, a dangerous glint in his eyes. I want you to put together a summary. Every payment, every date, every amount, down to the last cent. Why? Because at my birthday party, in front of the entire Whitmore and Harrison family, I intend for the truth to come out. Justice, as I learned in 40 years on the bench, has a way of speaking for itself when the evidence is irrefutable. My hands trembled around my mug, the trauma of the last few weeks bubbling up. What if they hate me? What if the rest of the family thinks I'm the one being dramatic? The ones who matter won't. He reached across and squeezed my hand, his grip firm and grounded. And the ones who do, well, they never deserved you anyway. The next 2 weeks were a blur of surgical precision and cold, hard preparation. I spent every night after Sophie and Noah went to bed, sitting at my mahogany desk, printing every bank statement, every wire transfer confirmation, and every Zelle notification from the last 8 years. The paper trail was a mile long, a physical manifestation of my exploited labor. I organized them chronologically, bound in a heavy plain manila folder that felt like a loaded weapon in my hands. Looking at it all together was staggering. Month after month, year after year, a river of my residency salary flowing in one direction to keep a sinking ship afloat. Aunt Jo came over 3 days before the party. She was 55, sharp-tongued, wore her graying hair in a chic bob, and had always been the black sheep of the Harrison family for refusing to smile and nod when things were clearly rotting from the inside. She flipped through the folder on my kitchen island, her expression darkening with each page. $360,000, she said flatly, her voice echoing in the quiet kitchen. Maya, do you understand what this is? This is a house in the suburbs. This is a full Ivy League tuition. This is your retirement. I know. This is more than most people make in 7 years of full-time work, I said, my voice hollow. She set down the folder with a heavy thud. And they called you a burden. The audacity is breathtaking. I pressed my palms against the granite counter, feeling the cold stone. I don't want to destroy the family, Joe. I just want them to see, to acknowledge what I've done. I want the gaslighting to stop. You're not destroying anything, honey. She stood and put her hand on my shoulder, her grip warm and grounding. You're just stopping the lie. They built their comfortable country club life on your silence. You're not obligated to keep giving them that shield. I nodded, though my stomach churned with a nauseating anxiety. What if everyone takes their side? What if blood is thicker than the truth? Some might, she shrugged, unfazed. Family is complicated and often deeply dysfunctional. But your grandfather has a lot of influence in this town, and more importantly, you have the unfiltered truth. That's a gavel no one can outrun. That evening, I got a text from a cousin I barely spoke to since high school. Heard you and your parents had a falling out. Sloane's been telling everyone you've been acting erratic and unstable since your accident. Just wanted to give you a heads up. Stay safe. I stared at the message, the blue bubble glowing in the dark. They were already spinning the narrative, painting me as the crazy daughter, preparing their defense before I even arrived at the gates. I hadn't wanted a fight, but it seemed they were bringing a full-scale war anyway. Judge Harrison's house was a colonial estate on 3 acres of manicured land in the Highlands. White columns, a massive wraparound porch, and a driveway that whispered of old money and quiet, absolute authority. I pulled into the circular driveway in my modest SUV, my hands tight on the steering wheel until my knuckles were white. Sophie and Noah were in their car seats, chattering about the castle house and the dozens of gold balloons they could see through the grand windows. More than 40 cars, mostly Mercedes and Porsches, lined the property. The whole family was here. I wore a simple navy dress from Nordstrom. Professional, understated. The uniform of a woman who had nothing to hide. I wasn't here to make a scene. I was here to set the record straight. The folder was tucked safely in my bag like a silent witness. Inside, the party was already in full swing. Valets moved with practiced efficiency. Waiters circulated with crystal flutes of Veuve Clicquot. A string quartet played Mozart in the corner, the music dancing under the massive baccarat chandelier light. I spotted them immediately. My parents stood near the marble fireplace. Dad in his best custom suit, looking distinguished and utterly relaxed. Mom in a bespoke cream-colored dress, laughing at something a family friend said. They looked like the picture-perfect American success story, funded entirely by my 80-hour weeks in the ICU. They saw me at the same moment. Mom's performative laugh died instantly. Dad's face went rigid, his eyes darting to the exits. For a long moment, none of us moved. Then Sloane appeared. My sister glided over in a Gucci gown that probably cost more than my monthly student loan payment. Her smile was perfect porcelain, but her eyes were shards of ice. "Oh, Maya," she air-kissed my cheek, the scent of expensive perfume cloying. "You made it. We heard about your incident. Nothing too serious, I hope. You know how you tend to overreact." I met her gaze steadily, refusing to flinch. "A ruptured spleen and internal bleeding, Sloane. I almost died on the operating table while you were at the Eras tour." Her smile flickered for a microsecond. "Mom said it was just a fender bender. She said you were just stressed." Mom wasn't there. I shifted Noah to my other hip, feeling his small weight. "None of you were. You were busy with Taylor." Sloane's composure cracked for just a second, a flash of genuine malice crossing her face. Then she recovered, patting my arm with false sympathy that made my skin crawl. "Well, you look fine now. That's what matters. Let's not ruin Grandpa's night with your drama." She drifted away, but I felt the first rumble of thunder. This was only the beginning of the siege. The attack came 30 minutes into the party. I was getting fruit punch for the twins when I heard Sloane's voice, deliberately loud, carrying across the grand ballroom. "I'm so worried about Maya, honestly." She was talking to a cluster of aunts and cousins near the dessert table. "The accident really affected her mentally. She's been saying the strangest things. Cut off all contact with Mom and Dad for no reason after they've done everything for her." I kept my back turned, but every word landed like a poisoned dart. Mom joined in, dabbing her eyes with a silk handkerchief. "We've tried everything. Calls, texts. She won't respond. I think she's having some kind of post-traumatic breakdown." "Poor thing," someone murmured, the pity in their voice feeling like an insult. She's always been the sensitive one, Sloane added, twisting the knife. Remember how dramatic she was as a teenager? I think the stress of being a single mom on a residence salary has just been too much for her to handle. I felt eyes on me, pitying looks, whispered concerns fluttering through the room like dead leaves. I said nothing, just handed Noah his juice cup and smoothed Sophie's hair. Aunt Jo appeared at my side, her voice low and furious. They've been laying groundwork all week, calling relatives, planting seeds of doubt. They know something's coming, and they're trying to assassinate your character first. It's a classic defensive maneuver. I know, I whispered, my heart hammering against my ribs. Are you okay? I looked across the room at my grandfather. He was watching the scene from his high-backed leather chair with an unreadable expression, a glass of neat whiskey in his hand. He gave me the smallest, most imperceptible nod. I'm fine, I told Joe. Let them talk. The higher they build the lie, the harder it falls. The room quieted suddenly. Someone clinked a glass. Judge Harrison rose from his chair. At 70, he still commanded attention like the unyielding judge he'd been for 4 decades. Every eye in the room turned to him, the authority of the Harrison name settling over the crowd. Before we continue with the festivities, he said, his voice carrying effortlessly to the back of the estate, I have a few things I'd like to say for the record. The air changed, growing heavy with anticipation. This was it, the moment of truth. Okay, I need to pause here for a second. Before the judge reveals what he knows, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where someone tried to rewrite the truth about you? Where they painted you as the crazy one just because you finally stood up for yourself against their abuse? Drop a comment and share your story, or just type truth if you've been there. And if you're enjoying this reckoning, please hit that like button. Trust me, what happens next is the ultimate judicial smackdown. Now, back to the party. Before Judge Harrison could continue, my father stepped forward, his chest puffed out in a display of false confidence. Dad, wait. His voice was controlled, but I could see the pulsing tension in his jaw. Before you say anything, there's something the family should know about Maya's current state. Judge Harrison raised an eyebrow, a look that had made many a lawyer tremble. Richard. Dad turned to face the room, every inch the concerned parent, playing his role to the cheap seats. As many of you may have heard, my daughter Maya has been going through a very dark and difficult time. After her accident, she's been confused, distant, perhaps even delusional. He gestured toward me with a sad, practiced smile. She's cut off contact with her mother and me completely, leaving us heartbroken and confused. Mom stepped up beside him, still clutching that handkerchief like a prop in a soap opera. We've only ever wanted the best for her, she said, her voice trembling with manufactured grief. But she's been spreading terrible lies about us, saying we abandoned her, that we don't love her. It's the trauma talking. We know that. The room was silent. I felt 40 pairs of eyes boring into me, searching for signs of the breakdown they had been promised. We've tried to be patient, Dad continued, his voice growing bolder as he saw the nods of sympathy. But it's been heartbreaking. We gave that girl everything. The best education, our constant support, our lives. Everything, Sloane added from the sidelines, her voice dripping with venom. She's even been claiming we refused to help her during her accident, which is absolutely not true. We were never even notified it was serious. There must be some kind of unfortunate misunderstanding. Someone near me let out a sympathetic murmur. The poor things. To have a child turn on you like that. I stood frozen, my fingers digging into the leather of my bag. Sophie had buried her face in my neck, sensing the toxic tension. Maya, an aunt I barely knew, approached me, her hand hovering near my arm as if I might snap. Honey, is everything okay? Your parents are so worried about you. Maybe you should go lay down? I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. The weight of their collective lie was suffocating. Then, Judge Harrison's voice cut through the room like a slamming gavel. Are you finished, Richard? The question was quiet, mild even, but every person in that room heard the cold, razor-sharp steel underneath. Dad's confident expression faltered for the first time. I just thought the family should know the facts, Dad. The family should know the truth, Judge Harrison interrupted, his voice rising with a controlled fury that silenced the string quartet once and for all. And I intend to give it to them, every single line item of it. Judge Harrison walked to the center of the grand ballroom with the measured, deliberate gait of a man who had presided over thousands of high-stakes cases and never once lost control of his courtroom. The air in the estate seemed to thin, the festive atmosphere replaced by the suffocating weight of an impending judgment. I've listened to your concerns, Richard, he said, his voice low and vibrating with authority. Victoria, Sloane, you've painted a very clear picture of a troubled young woman who's turned against her loving family. He paused, letting the echoes of his words hang in the silence of the baccarat chandeliers. Now, I'd like to ask some questions for the record. Richard's confident expression faltered, his fingers twitching at his sides. Dad, I don't think this is the place for a cross-examination. This is exactly the place, Judge Harrison snapped, the sharp crack of his voice hitting like a gavel. This is family, and families should know the truth about each other before they pass judgment on the innocent. He turned to my father, his gaze narrowing. Richard, a simple question to establish the baseline. Who has been paying the mortgage on your 4-bedroom house for the past 8 years? The color drained from Richard's face as if a plug had been pulled. What? Our mortgage? That's a private matter, Dad. Your mortgage, $2,400 a month for 96 consecutive months. Nearly $250,000. Who's been paying it? Richard's eyes darted to Victoria, searching for a lifeline that wasn't there. We pay our own mortgage. We've always managed. Do you? Judge Harrison reached into his navy jacket pocket and pulled out a folder. My folder. The one containing the cold, hard evidence of my stolen youth. Because I have here a complete record of bank transfers from Maya's account to your mortgage company every single month for 8 years. Every payment is time-stamped. Every cent is tracked. A murmur rippled through the room like a sudden gust of wind. That's a misunderstanding, Victoria stammered, clutching her pearls with trembling fingers. Maya offered. She wanted to help. We never asked. It was her way of showing gratitude. I'm not suggesting you held a gun to her head, Victoria, Judge Harrison said calmly, though the edge in his voice could have cut glass. "I'm simply establishing the facts of the matter." He opened the folder with a crisp, professional snap. "Let me share some numbers with the family. I think they'll find them highly illuminating considering the burden Maya supposedly is." Across the room, Sloane had gone pale, her designer gown suddenly looking like a shroud. Richard's hands were clenched at his sides until his knuckles turned white. Victoria looked like she might faint onto the Persian rug. And I stood there holding my children, my heart pounding a rhythm of pure, unadulterated vindication. 8 years, Judge Harrison read from the folder, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. Let's break it down for those who value transparency. Mortgage payments, $230,400. He looked up, his blue eyes piercing. That's the house Richard and Victoria live in. The house they claim they pay for themselves while they disparage the woman who actually signs the checks. Someone gasped near the buffet table. Health insurance premiums, $76,800, the judge continued, flipping a page with deadly precision. When Richard's company dropped their coverage and he was too proud to work at a grocery store, Maya picked up the bill while she was pulling triple shifts in the ER. He flipped another page, the sound sharp in the dead silence. Car repairs, home maintenance, emergency expenses, the new HVAC system, the roof repair after the spring storms. Approximately $45,000. Another page. Cash gifts and financial support for Sloane's failing fashion ventures. $12,000. He closed the folder with a final, heavy thud. Total, $364,200, give or take a few thousand in convenience fees. The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant sound of a valet's whistle. Aunt Jo stepped forward, her eyes burning with a righteous fire. For context, everyone, that's more than most people make in 7 years of full-time, back-breaking work. Maya did this while completing her medical residency and raising infant twins without a single night of help from the people she was feeding. She offered, Victoria's voice cracked, dropping the concerned mother act for a shrill, desperate tone. We never forced her. She's a doctor. She could afford it. No one said you forced her, Judge Harrison replied, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. But I am curious. In 8 years of receiving this staggering level of support, how many times did you say thank you? How many times did you acknowledge the sacrifice she was making while you were buying front row seats to concerts? No answer. The silence was an admission of guilt. How many times did you visit her in the hospital after Sophie and Noah were born, when she was recovering from an emergency surgery alone? Still nothing. The crowd was beginning to pull away from my parents, creating a physical gap of disgust. My mother started crying now, not the delicate, sympathetic tears from earlier, but real, ugly sobs of a woman caught in a lie. We thought she was fine, Richard said, his voice hollow and weak. She never complained. She always managed. She made it look easy. She managed, Judge Harrison repeated, the words dripping with contempt. Because she had to. Because you taught her that her needs didn't matter as long as the bills were paid. An uncle near the back shook his head, his voice dripping with disbelief. Jesus, Richard, $360,000, and you called her a burden in front of the whole club? Richard flinched like he'd been struck by a physical blow. But Judge Harrison wasn't finished. He was just getting to the smoking gun. There's one more thing the family should hear, the judge said, his tone shifting to something even more ominous. He pulled out his phone, adjusting his reading glasses with clinical calmness. 2 months ago, Maya was in a car accident, a serious one. She was bleeding internally and being rushed to emergency surgery at Mercy General. From the ambulance, fearing for her life, she called her parents. Her children were home with a babysitter who was about to leave. She needed someone to watch them for a few hours while surgeons tried to stop her hemorrhaging. He paused, looking directly at Victoria and Richard, who were now visibly trembling. This is the text message she received in response, from Victoria. I'll read it exactly as it was sent. He cleared his throat, the words hitting the room like shrapnel. Maya, you've always been a nuisance and a burden. We have Taylor Swift tickets with Sloan tonight. This was a non-refundable investment. Figure it out yourself. The room erupted in a chorus of gasps and outraged whispers. Oh my God, someone breathed near the quartet. That's subhuman. That's not... You're taking it out of context, Sloan said desperately, her voice reaching a frantic pitch. There were logistics involved. There is no context, Aunt Jo snapped, stepping into the light. That makes abandoning your daughter during a medical emergency acceptable. You chose a pop star over your own child's life. We didn't know it was serious, Richard shouted, a last-ditch effort at self-preservation. Did you ask? Judge Harrison's voice cut through the chaos like a lightning strike. Did you call her back? Did you come to the hospital the next day? Did you even check if the twins were fed? Silence. The kind of silence that marks the end of a reputation. The answer, for those wondering, is no, no, and no, the judge concluded. A woman I recognized as a distant cousin stepped away from my parents, her face twisted with pure disgust. Several others followed, the Starr family now isolated in the center of the room. Victoria was sobbing uncontrollably now, the mask completely shattered. I didn't mean it like that. I was frustrated. I didn't think... You didn't think your daughter might die, Judge Harrison finished, closing the file for the final time. Because you never thought about her at all. She was just a ledger entry to you. He turned to face the room, his duty as the arbiter of truth complete. I'm not asking anyone to pass judgment. I'm simply presenting the evidentiary facts. What you do with them is your own choice. He looked at me finally, his eyes soft and brimming with a rare, fierce pride. Maya, is there anything you'd like to say before we close this session? I hadn't planned to speak. I'd come here expecting Judge Harrison to handle everything, to let the facts speak for themselves while I stood silently in a quiet vindication. But looking around the room, at my crying mother, my shell-shocked father, and Sloane's crumbling socialite facade, I realized I had something to say after all. I wasn't a doctor in this moment. I wasn't a resident. I was a woman reclaiming her soul. I handed Noah to Aunt Jo and stepped forward into the center of the mahogany-paneled room, my heels clicking softly on the polished hardwood. I didn't come here for revenge, though the legal minds in this room might call it a long overdue restitution. My voice was steadier than I expected, tempered by years of delivering life or death news in the high-stress environment of the ICU. I came here because Judge Harrison invited me, and because for 34 years I've been living with a version of my family that wasn't real. A curated, high-gloss version where I was the strong one, the reliable one, the silent partner in my own exploitation. I looked at my parents, who were now huddled together like survivors of a shipwreck near the fireplace. I believed you when you said Sloane needed more support because the fashion industry was fickle and her artistic soul was fragile. When you said I could handle things on my own, I believed you. And I tried to be exactly what you needed, the daughter you didn't have to worry about until the mortgage was due. A tear slid down my cheek, hot and stinging, but I didn't wipe it away. But that night in the ambulance, bleeding and terrified, I finally understood the cold, hard physics of our relationship. I wasn't strong to you. I was a utility. I wasn't reliable. I was exploitable. And no matter how much I gave, no matter how many six-figure sums I funneled into your lifestyle, it would never be enough to make you see me the way you see her. You cannot earn love from people who only see you as a resource. Several family members had moved closer to me, their presence forming a physical barrier between me and the people who had abandoned me. An aunt touched my arm with a look of profound regret. A cousin I hadn't spoken to since high school graduation nodded with tears in his eyes. My father started to speak, his voice cracking like dry parchment. Maya, I'm not finished, I said, cutting him off with the quiet finality of a closing argument. He stopped, his shoulders slumping. I don't hate you, I said quietly, though hate might have been easier to carry than this hollow disappointment. But I can't keep pretending this is okay. I can't keep buying an imitation of love that should have been free by birthright. An uncle across the room turned to my father, his voice dripping with the kind of judgment only old money can deliver. How could you, Richard? This whole time you've been living off your daughter's brutal hospital shifts while treating her like an annoying line item in your budget. The room was turning. The social capital my parents had spent decades building was vanishing in real time. So what now? Dad's voice was desperate, the sound of a man watching his penthouse lifestyle crumble. You've humiliated us in front of the whole family at the club. Are you happy? I shook my head slowly, feeling a strange, detached pity for him. I'm not happy, Dad. None of this makes me happy. I took a breath, feeling the slight tug of my surgical staples. But I'm also not sorry, because this isn't about humiliation. It's about fiscal and emotional honesty. For the first time in 8 years, our family knows the truth. Not your whitewashed version, not Sloane's PR-managed spin. The truth. Sloane tried once more, her voice reaching a shrill, manic pitch. This is ridiculous! You're acting like we're monsters. We're your family. Families help each other through the lean times. You're right. I turned to face her, noticing for the first time how small she looked in her $4,000 dress. Families do help each other. So, Where were you when I was pregnant and alone in that tiny grad student apartment? Where were you when I was raising newborns while studying for my cardiology boards? Where were you when I was bleeding out in an ambulance while you were singing along to Shake It Off? She had no answer. The silence that followed was absolute. I looked back at my parents. From now on, I won't be sending money. Not because I can't afford it. My salary is more than enough to cover my life and my children's future. But because financial support should be a gift, not an extorted obligation. And it should flow both ways in a family that actually cares about each other. My mother reached toward me, her hand trembling. Maya, please, think of the house. I'm also not cutting you off forever, I continued, ignoring the plea for the colonial. But I need space, real, clinical space, not a few weeks of calculated guilt tripping followed by everything going back to the toxic normal. I need you to actually think about what you've done without a checkbook to soften the blow. And if someday you can acknowledge it, really acknowledge it, maybe we can rebuild something. I took Noah back from Aunt Jo, but I won't hold my breath. I've learned that some people prefer the lie to the person who told them the truth. A great aunt approached me, taking my hands in her weathered ones, the scent of lavender and old lace surrounding her. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I had no idea. All these years, I thought you were the one who had it easy because you were the doctor. I know, I said softly, the weight finally lifting from my chest. Everyone did. That's how it was supposed to look. The perfect facade. All right, I want to check in with you again. That moment when I finally said those words, when I chose my own survival over their comfort, did it resonate with you? I know so many of us have been taught that family means unlimited sacrifice, no matter how toxic the cost. But here's the thing. Boundaries aren't a betrayal of love. They are a requirement for it. Type boundaries in the comments if you agree. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, someone being used as a human ATM, share it with them. Now let's see what happened in the aftermath. My parents left the party early. No one stopped them. No one said goodbye or offered to walk them to the valet. Dad helped Mom to the car while she sobbed into his shoulder, her Eras Tour mascara running down her face. Sloane followed with her head down, refusing to make eye contact with anyone who might ask her for the $300,000 back. The silence they left behind was heavy, but not uncomfortable, more like the quiet after a cleansing storm passes. In the days that followed, the fallout was swift and brutal. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from relatives. Cousins I'd barely spoken to in years reached out to apologize. Aunts and uncles who'd always believed my parents' narrative of the perfect, successful family were reevaluating everything. I always thought you were the difficult one, my cousin Rachel texted me. Sloane made it sound like you pulled away for no reason because you were jealous. I'm so sorry I believed her. The family group chat, the one where I'd received that devastating message, went silent. Then it was deleted entirely. A digital burial for a dead relationship. More significantly, my parents found themselves quietly excluded from the tight-knit social circles of the Highlands. When my cousin Michael had his 40th birthday 3 weeks later, they weren't invited. When Aunt Jo hosted Easter brunch, their names weren't on the list. No one made a formal announcement. No one declared sides. The truth had simply made them social pariahs. My mother called me from a new number 2 weeks after the party. I let it go to voicemail. Maya, please. We need to talk. This has all been blown out of proportion. Your father is devastated. I'm devastated. The bank is calling about the second mortgage. Can't we just move past this? I listened to it once, then I deleted it. Forgiveness wasn't a reset button on a credit card debt. I knew that now. It was a release for me, not for them, and I wasn't ready to release anything yet. But the financial consequences, those were just beginning. 3 months after the party, I got a call from Aunt Jo. They're selling the Colonial. I set down my iced Americano. What? Your parents? They put the house on the market last week. Word is they couldn't keep up with the mortgage payments without your direct deposit. I should have felt something. Satisfaction, vindication, maybe even guilt. Instead, I just felt tired. Where will they go? Your Uncle Frank is letting them stay in his guest house in the valley temporarily. Joe paused. He made it very clear it's conditional. They need to get jobs. Real 40-hour-a-week jobs, not just waiting for someone else to bail them out. Jobs. My parents hadn't worked full-time in years. Dad took early retirement at 55 on my dime. Mom had never worked outside the home. They'd been living off my money, and they hadn't even realized how parasitic they'd become. What about Sloane? Can't she help? Joe laughed, a sharp, dry sound. Sloane's been drowning since her high-profile divorce. Word got out about the party. Someone in the family has a big mouth at Vogue. She lost a major design contract because the label didn't want the bad PR. Last I heard, she's waitressing part-time at a bistro in Santa Monica. I stared out my kitchen window at Sophie and Noah playing in the backyard. I don't want them to suffer, I said quietly. I know you don't, sweetheart. That's because you're a good person. Joe's voice softened. But they didn't suffer for 8 years because you were supporting them. They didn't grow. They didn't learn how to be adults. You stopping wasn't cruel. It was the most honest thing you've ever done. She was right. I knew she was right. That evening, I sat down with my new budget. The $3,200 I used to send my parents every month now went into a 529 college fund for the twins. They'd never worry about student loans. They'd never have to carry their parents' vanity like a backpack full of rocks. That felt like justice enough. The call came on a Tuesday night, 6 months after Judge Harrison's party. I was putting the twins to bed when my phone lit up with an unknown number from a 310 area code. Normally, I'd ignore it, but something made me answer. Maya? Sloane's voice was different, smaller, stripped of the vocal fry and the condescension. Sloane, please don't hang up. She took a shaky breath. I know I don't deserve your time, but I need to say something. I sat down on the edge of my bed, the room dark except for the twins' nightlight. I'm listening. I'm sorry. The words came out cracked, genuine for the first time in our lives. I'm so sorry for everything. For the way I treated you. For the things I said. For laughing at that text message when you were... Her voice broke. When you were dying, I laughed. I sat in a stadium and watched Taylor Swift while my sister was being cut open. What kind of person does that? I waited. I didn't know the answer. She continued about the money. Not all of it. I knew Mom and Dad were struggling, but I thought they were managing. I didn't realize it was you. For 8 years. Maya, how did I not know? Did you ever ask? Silence. No, she whispered. I didn't, because I didn't want to know. I liked being the favorite. I liked that everything came easy for me. I liked the lie. She laughed bitterly. Nothing's easy anymore. I'm working doubles at a diner just to pay for my studio apartment. I heard about the contract. Yeah, turns out your reputation matters in this industry. People talk. We sat in silence for a moment. I'm not asking for money, she finally said, or forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. What Mom and Dad did, I see all of it. I took a deep breath, feeling a strange sense of closure. Then start from there. Stand on your own feet. Be better. Yeah. Her voice was thick with tears. I'm trying. Good. I hung up, and for the first time, I felt something like hope for her, not for us, but for the person she might become. 6 months after that call, 1 year after the accident that changed everything, I stood in my new apartment watching the sun set over the city skyline. It wasn't big. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a small kitchen with stainless steel appliances, but it was 5 minutes from Mercy General in a good school district, and most importantly, it was mine. No mortgage payments to parents who didn't appreciate them. No insurance premiums for people who called me a burden. Just rent, utilities, and a college fund growing steadily every month. Sophie and Noah were at Judge Harrison's house for the afternoon. He'd become a fixture in our lives over the past year. Every Sunday, he'd pick them up for adventures, the zoo, the park, expensive ice cream that I pretended not to know about. They're good kids, he told me once, his hand on my shoulder. You're raising them right, Maya. From him, that meant everything. Aunt Jo had become more than family. She was a friend. We had dinner together twice a month at a little bistro downtown. She'd help me navigate the emotional aftermath of the party, of setting boundaries, of learning to prioritize myself without feeling the phantom itch of guilt. You know what I admire about you? She said recently. You didn't become bitter. A lot of people would have. You had every right to. What would be the point? I'd replied. Bitterness is just drinking poison and expecting someone else to get sick. I've already had enough poison to last a lifetime. As for my parents, we hadn't spoken directly, but I knew from family whispers that they were still at Uncle Frank's. Dad had gotten a part-time job at a Home Depot. Mom was doing bookkeeping for a local church. They weren't thriving, but they were surviving. Some days I wondered if they thought about me, if they missed me, if they regretted anything. But those weren't my questions to answer. I'd spent 34 years carrying their weight. The ledger is finally balanced. If you've made it this far, I want to leave you with something. Not advice. I'm not qualified to tell anyone how to live their life. But maybe a reflection. A lesson I learned the hard way in a trauma bay. For 34 years, I believed that love was something you could earn, that if I just gave enough, sacrificed enough, asked for nothing in return, eventually the people who were supposed to love me would see my value. I was wrong. Love isn't a transaction. It's not a reward for being useful. And no amount of money, time, or energy can buy something that should have been freely given from the start. The family I have now, Judge Harrison, Aunt Jo, friends like Julian Smith who showed up when my own parents wouldn't, they didn't love me because of what I could provide. They loved me because of who I am. That's the difference. And it took almost dying on an operating table to understand it. I don't know what happens next with my parents. Maybe someday they'll truly change. Maybe they'll reach out with genuine remorse, ready to rebuild something real. If that happens, I'll consider it. But I won't wait for it. I won't shape my life around the hope of something that may never come. My life is mine now. My energy, my resources, my love. And if the people who raised you call your self-respect betrayal, then maybe they never deserved your loyalty in the first place. To anyone out there carrying a weight that was never yours to bear, it's okay to put it down. It's okay to choose yourself. You're not selfish. You're not ungrateful. You're not a burden. You're finally free. Thank you so much for staying with me through this story. If it resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. It means the world to me. I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to draw a boundary with family? How did it change your life? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, stories about standing up for yourself and finding your voice, check out the video in the description. I think you'll love it. Until next time, take care of yourself. You deserve it.